It's a great time of the year, so it's time to have a great friend of the show on. We're talking Graham Couch. That's right, of the Couch in the Room podcast of the Lansing State Journal. What else are we going to talk about? Come on, it's Michigan State in the Sweet 16. Let's go.
Are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, I know we're all in a good mood. And not just because, we're going to the Sweet 16 for the 15th time in Tom Izzo's tenure here, but we're talking with one of the best people out there. That's right, friend of the program, Graham Couch. Really doesn't need an introduction, but yeah, he does work for Lansing State Journal, the Couch in the Room podcast. Graham, how on earth are you doing, good friend?
Yeah, this is kind of fun. It's been a little while since they've been on one of these runs, and that almost forgot what the second weekend felt like. The rush to get make sure everything's booked properly, and but this is, if you don't enjoy this and you're doing what I do for a living, you are in the wrong business, because this is fun. There's buzz, there's energy with your readers and listeners like that. I mean, and the storylines are good, and people are excited, and it's kind of a whirlwind.
That's something my mom said after the game, too. I was lucky enough to watch the game with the whole family. And she said, if they lost, what are you going to talk about this week? It's like 5 episodes of the new secondary coach. I don't know. So we got some more buzz in the air going. It's a fantastic time. And you're just the perfect guest for this, because on and off, more times than not, when you join this show, you are the regulator of emotions here. You keep us in check, whether we're getting too high or if it's during football season, a little too down on ourselves. So, Graham, why does this feel different for us Michigan State fans? Is it just because it has been since 2019 a Sweet 16 has come along? Is it just because us State fans need something to smile about kind of after that football season too? Or is there really something different about this team as we head into another Sweet 16 here? Is this justified to be this jazzed?
I think there are two things. One is, it had been a minute. And some of that has to do with the pandemic, which it really hadn't been that many basketball seasons, but they made a run. And so that's been a while. It's been a long 3 years for a lot of people in this world. And so there is something to the second weekend that is different too. Because you get the pause. You get to relish in it a little bit. When you win a game, it's a day and there's another game. When you get to the Sweet 16, it's a little more of a celebration. There's an anticipation now that's allowed the second weekend, and so that just feels different. Michigan State's history says when they get this far, they often keep going. So I'm conditioned for that, and I do think this team, I've thought all along, had a little maybe other middling season tournament more than last year, even though they played really well against Duke. And different than the 2015 team that made a Final Four run. Now, I'm not saying this team will get there. I think the matchup against is tough. But in 2015, for example, got really mm-hmm. If you were to take these two teams and they were to play against each other 10 times, 2015 team and this team, I think this team would win 7 of those 10 games, unless that team was just so hot, But this team is winning, finding ways to win different ways, which I think is important. So that gives this kind of 85-3 Final Four games of the regular season, and then just won 2 NCAA tournament games where it went 7 for 30 combined. Yeah. So I think there's this sense that these guys will figure it out. They played a really disciplined scouting report against Marquette, and were better than most of that game, in a Marquette team that won 10 straight games. So I think there's hope that this team is actually really good.
So what is it that surprised you the most about the last 2 games? Because, of course, I point to the 3-point shooting you just alluded to. 7 of 30 is stinking enough to join. That's from a team that shot top 5 in the nation. Or was it something else, like the flip of the switch on defense, maybe a guy making himself as the alpha dog down the stretcher? What was the biggest surprise for you over the last 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, nothing Tyson Walker does in big moments surprises me anymore. I mean, that's
Gotcha.
who he is. That's who he is at this point. And he's been telling. I mean, early on this year he had a big game, and it was not the 30-point game in Purdue, but it was I forget, it was a 24-point game earlier in the year, and he just said, "This is who I am." Like that's what he says in the locker room. Like he's been trying to say this, and we've seen it. And what I think surprised me, I thought they could turn it on defensively. I thought there'd be a gear. There's a focus that comes around the NCAA tournament. It was a big game atmosphere and intensity. You couldn't help but be focused in that moment. But I think it's also that some of the things they didn't do during the season, like they just kept scoring. They kept at it. There were no real lulls. There were no big runs from Marquette. Yeah, Marquette had a couple surges and had a little bit of control for a brief stretch there, late first half or early second. But, Michigan State's guards just kept putting them in a good position, kept the pace going, kept them in front or on the front foot a little bit. That is something that was not in the DNA of this team at all times this year against good teams. Like, I mean, I've thought Michigan State had the ability to pull off upsets, but they look like a better team than Marquette, and Marquette just stormed through the Big East.
Spot on. And like, that's one thing that I kept saying yesterday. It's like, yeah, it's a 7-2, but like, I have a hard time using the U word of upset. I mean, it just looked the part, but something that also was maybe a little bit of a surprise, at least to me. I mean, we've seen this happen throughout, Tom Izzo's tenure, player-led teams, but we haven't, at least from the outside looking in, haven't seen that for a bulk of not just this season, but maybe the last few seasons. You wrote a great column on it, is that Joey Hauser really had a big moment in one of those final timeouts going into the stretch of that Marquette game. Like, was that something that's been around kind of all year and, people like me just haven't noticed it? Or do you think that's a new development as well of guys stepping up into big spots and just taking the game under their own wings?
No, it's news who are decent, leaders to an extent. They don't have the natural born, fiery leader. I mean, AJ Hoggard has a little of that in him, but also sort of directs it in weird ways sometimes, and it doesn't always work for him. But and I think Malik Hall has some of it in him, but he's been injured and played such a role that's been hard for him to do. But now guys are playing well, and there's sort of a collective voice that these guys are comfortable with. I mean, Hauser in that second to last timeout basically said, this is the play we need to run. We need to get the ball to Tyson Walker, do this to create space. Shot. And the last time out after that, a team that had legit in the final minute against Iowa, all the guys were talking, okay, this is what we can't do. This is the shot you can't give up here, and you won't lose the game. Yep. They're a product of their season, and they have learned from it. And that doesn't always, you have to have veterans and strong resolve and leadership and growth, because sometimes, who you are, like in Michigan, for example, this year, they lost a lot of close games. And that's their DNA, and it just was who they were all the way through. And they never improved on. And, there are lots of reasons for that, a whole different conversation. But what I mean is, it can become part of your DNA and be eventually what takes you down. But for Michigan State, there seems to be growth from it. And they've had a weird season. One of the columns I'm sort of workshopping and writing a column now on their season a little bit and how to perceive this program right now. And one of the things that's interesting is, I mean, they played the Big Ten's toughest schedule. They didn't play Minnesota a single time while everybody else
right.
Twice, obviously. A couple injuries that sort of arc of the season and how the team came together. And so you could easily see how that could go differently, and they could have 3 more Big Ten wins. And then at 14-6, they're battling Purdue, and they're a 3 or 4 seed. And so the season sort of, in hindsight, being 11-8, given all they went through, wasn't all that bad. It's just, and then they look good at the end. The Ohio State game, I think, gave a lot of people pause. But it also, what we saw at the Big Ten tournament that's a whole other discussion. Remind me a year from now to come on and talk about why the Big Ten tournament does not matter.
Sure. Yeah, we're well on our way there. Yeah, just 2 more games, and I'm ready to completely throw that out the window. Who are we kidding? I've already moved on from it, if we're being honest with ourselves. But there's a question that obviously is going to be a big one going into this weekend, and it's who out of the East region is going to be that Final Four representative. I'm going to let you sit on that one, though, for a hot second, Graham, because I need to talk the people's ear off about FanDuel Sportsbook. And you know what? Hey, let's just throw the numbers out there right now. FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, they have your Michigan State Spartans at plus 280 to go to the Final Four. That's the second best odds. Tennessee, plus 120. Kansas State, plus 320. And then Florida Atlantic, those Owls, plus 470. Those are the odds at FanDuel. If you're loving the Spartans, go throw $10 on them. If they make the Final Four, you profit 28 smackaroos. And if that's not sweet enough, hey, well, if you're a new FanDuel Sportsbook customer, it gets even sweeter for you because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's right. That is in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use, and Mr. FanDuel is paying you instantly. This isn't your old school sports book where you're just waiting for days at a time for money to hit your account. Mr. FanDuel, he gets the money out of his pocket. He gives it to you as fast as he possibly can. And also, hey, they could also make it even more exciting with the same game parlay. Combine some bets for a chance to win a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Do not miss the chance to get in on your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment worth. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And let's get the wonderful Graham Couch back into the mix here. And I'll say the numbers again, the gambling numbers. We do that a lot on this show. I do love I love myself some gambling numbers. That's good English. Whatever. We're going to power through. Tennessee plus 120 to make the Final Four. MSU plus 280 to make the Final Four. Kansas State plus 320 to make the Final Four. The Owls of Florida Atlantic plus 470. Graham, if I handed you a $10 bill, because we're high rollers here, where are you putting that money going into this weekend?
I would probably put it on Kansas State.
Okay.
I think, but I wouldn't feel great about it. I just think they have now. I think Michigan State's backcourt has a chance to prove that it's as good as any in the country, and they just took a step toward doing that with what they did against Marquette. I think with Marquise Newell and I don't pronounce it correctly, apologize. And Keontae Johnson, you have now Johnson's more of a forward. He's a 6'6" guy, but he's a wing. But you have two players, and Newell is a little guy who can create all sorts of havoc. He's a great playmaker. He does, some of the step back shots he makes and things he sees are next level. This is going to be a real challenge, and one I think Michigan State could be up to. But this is an older team like Michigan State. It's a team that's feeling itself a little right now. Their head coach put it well when they were talking about Kentucky and their guys. He said, we had more dudes than them today. And if you know anything about, when you listen to guys, when you say dudes in sports, that is like the ultimate compliment. That's when you have guys. Dudes are the 5-star defensive tackle, right? That's a dude. And that's what Kansas State has a little of right now. And they know it. And I think that's a difficult matchup. Now, I don't hate the matchup for Michigan State in certain ways because they get out and run. Mm-hmm. I think Michigan State will be good in transition defense. They aren't a great rebounding team, which Michigan State has been blessed to not run into that in the tournament. They don't really have a big guy who's going to hurt them in the post. I mean, frankly, next year, there's an argument to be made. Michigan State loses a game to Zach Edey and Purdue in January, and the entire post-game press conference is just Izzo saying, doesn't matter. These guys are going to lose in the first round of the tournament. This isn't what wins basketball. They can win the Big Ten. We'll get ourselves ready. That is because, and I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek because a team like UConn on the other side of the bracket, I think, does have some size and would be a real problem for Michigan State and is rolling a little bit. But I don't hate the matchup in certain ways. I do think, though, that if Michigan State gets by this game, I like their odds. I know Tennessee is a physically imposing team, but they don't have a point guard anymore. Michigan State scrimmaged them. They know what they're up against. And they don't do much well offensively. And so, and maybe they get Florida Atlantic. I think this is the game that determines whether Michigan State gets to a Final Four. But it's a really interesting matchup. Kansas State is more one-on-one than they've probably seen. But you give Izzo time to scout a defense and create some problems in the gaps for those guys, and it's not a horrible matchup. I really like Kansas State's team though.
And when it comes to this upcoming weekend, like Tyson Walker, I think 80% of State fans are going to say that Tyson Walker was the MVP of last weekend. But who has to be the MVP of this weekend coming up? Is it just as easy as Tyson Walker again, especially with that first round matchup against Kansas State and their solid guard play, and then against the Tennessee team, just like you said, they don't have a point guard anymore. Is it just that easy, or is there another player that you think that we shall have our eye on and really hope has an incredible 2 games here? Hopefully 2 games.
Tyson Walker can. AJ Hoggard is their ceiling.
Okay.
And I was talking to Joey Hauser yesterday in the locker room, and he said, that they can go as far as he would take them.
Yeah,
it's on Hoggard. Now, I do think a game certainly, and they could use a game, frankly, where somebody like Jaden Akins pops off for 15 points, or Joey Hauser has a really hot shooting night, and those sort of things can elevate you and just make life easier than what they've been doing the last 2 games. Although some of that was the way those 2 teams defended them, and to their credit, they adjusted.
Who impressed you more over the weekend? I'm trying to talk about this upcoming weekend, but also still not over last weekend. Who impressed you more, though, between these 2 guys, Carson Cooper or Mady Sissoko? Because they both have arguments to be said about themselves. Obviously, Carson Cooper wasn't necessarily supposed to be the 16-minute guy in a round 2 game in March Madness. But then again, Mady Sissoko also had no reason to play with that much confidence, especially with 4 fouls on him. So who do you give the nod to for a guy that was more impressive over the weekend?
Yeah, they're coming from different places with different needs. You think back to Carson Cooper was a guy who couldn't get off the bench, and they didn't play him in the opener. They could barely survive with him for a while, and now that he's an essential piece, and he was in the first matchup floor. Sissoko had a really interesting weekend. The first games, I thought he had his entire game his entire season in one game. It looked like Gonzaga, Kentucky Sissoko, and he got lost and looked like January Sissoko. Then he found somewhere in between. And then in the last game, though, he was, what he's doing so much better, and which is important, is when things go wrong for him, and he does get lost here and there still. He hasn't played the game that long, and he does not understand things. There was a while this season where that got in his head, and it ruined everything. He stopped being athletic. And so what he's started doing is there's a fire in him, and he understands I can screw up. I might screw up occasionally. Sometimes it's going to look bad. But ultimately, I have to lock in and play the next play. And if I do that, I'm around to make some good plays. I would give it to Sissoko, but Cooper has been just essential. They're not. They're not. I don't know if they win.
No, full agree right there. And you're known for your 3 takes after games. I don't work as hard as you, so I only have 1 take after the whole weekend here. And this might be spicy, so I need you to absolutely temperature check me on this one here. But I hope everyone's sitting down for this one. We're going to do a little bit of Locked On Boilermakers here as well. My take is, God, I might be feeling myself too much. I don't think I am. I'd rather be a Michigan State fan right now than a Purdue fan. And I understand how ridiculous that sounds, because Purdue just hung up 2 banners this season. Like, they won the regular season. They won the Big Ten tournament. That goes up into the rafters at Mackey Arena and Breslin Center, whoever wins that. But with that said, like, I feel fine being the Sweet 16. I'm not saying the Sweet 16 is the end-all, be-all, but, like, I'd rather be us than being Purdue, who has just lost to a 16 seed, the year after losing to a 15 seed, the year after losing to, a 13 seed. You have this coach that you're not going to fire. You're starting to have some serious doubts of, like, is this going to ever work in March? So I don't know. It just feels like,
well, they were
the lack of banners.
Yeah, they were a shot away from the Final Four not long ago. That
correct.
Was,
yeah.
So that,
yep.
And they went to a Sweet 6. They were in the second weekend somewhere, I think.
Last year. Yep.
Well, and even before that, so they've had a number of. It's been a bad stretch here. In terms of who they've lost to, but I mean, I would rather be Michigan State in this sense. Michigan State is looked at as the premier Big Ten program still, and the year does that, right? They're the team that goes somewhere in the tournament more likely. Izzo's got that. You would rather be that. You've got the titles and banners and the Big Ten banners and everything to show for it, and you're also in the moment. If you're Purdue, it's a tough go. I mean, Michigan State fans probably remember what it felt like in 2016 after the Middle Tennessee State game, trying to enjoy that tournament after that game, and that's hard to do. And so, there's no question, just the overall vibe right now. But even if in terms of the program place, I mean, Purdue may have a lot coming back. I think they'll be really good. Yeah. But Michigan State has got a nice class coming in and a lot coming back as well.
Yeah, try to enjoy the tournament after that. I think I've watched maybe 2 games after the 2016 Middle Tennessee State disaster happened. So, no, I sympathize with them right there. But, I mean, is it just as easy to say that the reason the Big Ten has struggled in March kind of yet again is because the best teams are so big man dominant? Like, that's the popular take going around as to why Purdue flames out, why Indiana didn't make it to the Sweet 16 again. Like, is it that easy, or do you think that there's a little bit more to it, how the teams are coached or the style of play or anything?
I mean, this is an interesting – the Big Ten this year is interesting because it wasn't supposed to be a great year for the league.
Right.
And so Purdue gets a lot of grief for overachieving. They were picked to finish 6th.
Yep.
They had 2 freshman guards, not the most athletic kids in the world. Guys who looked a little scared. We saw them look a little shook at home against Illinois late in the year. It's actually an indictment on the rest of the Big Ten that those who had athletic guards didn't get after those guys and put pressure on them earlier and test them in that way. So, and then, they looked rattled, I thought, in the game against Fairleigh Dickinson. But, it's a good question. I'm a Big Ten apologist.
Sure.
People dog the Big Ten. And, I think ultimately only, the Big Ten had one team that was really expected to get out of the first weekend. Now, Indiana was a 4. They lost in a 4-5. That's a 50-50. And the Purdue thing happened, but Michigan State won as a 7. So, I thought Penn State had a really good tournament for them. Northwestern winning a game, that was not bad. Maryland won a game. Iowa and Illinois, not great. Indiana yesterday, I thought should have been better. And the league, but I don't know how much each team is related to the other. Like, it's not like,
right.
It's not like you're this dumpy white guy at an AAU tournament. You look over and go, hey, there's my coaches in the corner. There's the Big Ten coaches. And if you're look over and there are the SEC coaches and that there, what's happening and to do with Mississippi, what happens and doesn't have anything to do with MSU. They get lumped in because they come out of the same league. You'd still rather be the Big Ten than anybody, because what the Big Ten is going to do is if the Big Ten wants you, they're going to go get you and you're going to join. It's where the money is. It's where the interest is.
Yep.
And it's the most balanced 2-sport conference that exists. Because the SEC, even though they have a lot of good basketball, it's still mostly driven.
Yeah.
I mean, the Big Ten is the best league to be a fan or be a part of, and that will, I think, always be the case. And they just took the Pac-12s to their, California team. So, I apologize for I do think the style, the brand they play in the league sometimes translate, and we're seeing that. And Michigan State this year did not have that big man, but had a lot of other components, and that style against the styles they've run into has worked.
Did you just formally put your hat in the ring for Big Ten commissioner now that Kevin Warren has stepped away? Was that your official cover letter or no? Because that was a good one. I like that one a lot, actually. You had me sold on it.
I would be people would be annoyed with me, not just in the Big Ten, but nationally. I would be annoying if I was the Big Ten commissioner, because I would.
Oh, come on. What would your first act be? Would it be the 6 fouls? Would your first act be going to 6 fouls in conference play, or is there something else that would stick out? Okay, 6 fouls.
No, 6 fouls for sure would be probably the thing. League, yeah. Now that probably would hurt them in the NCAA tournament, though. So I would be. If they were playing all year with 6 fouls and go to 5, I'd be the commissioner that ruined Big Ten basketball.
That might be a little hard, but I don't know. Then again, it depends what officiating crew you get. Because I swear I'll watch one game on TBS where these guys are murdering each other, like it is a UFC 5-on-5 fight, and then flip over to the True TV and every single thing is just getting whistled. So maybe it would actually really help you. I don't know. Just get used to physical basketball if you get the right officiating crew. But
my first thing to do I would hire full-time officials and pay them so well they sort of did as I asked.
Yes.
That would be where I would begin. And then pay them so well that that every official wanted to be a Big Ten official, to the point that when they faced Big Ten teams in the NCAA tournament, they treated them well.
That's genius. We're going to get the gears turning on this Big Ten commissioner thing, because this is speaking my language right now. This is awesome. Also awesome has been your time so far, but really quick, I got one question before you get there out on the road to enjoy the rest of your week, gear up for a trip to Madison Square Garden, and on social media, twitter.com, on the lovely internet, there's a picture of you, Chris Solari of the Free Press, Matt Charbonneau of the Detroit News, and I believe Kyle Austin of MLive at a bar. Between the four of you fantastic beat reporters, who's the most fun to go out with to a bar? Best storyteller, who owns the light? I'm not going to say who's the best drinker, so you flat out call someone an alcoholic, but between the four of you, who is the biggest hoot and a half out there?
That's a good question. But just the four of us, it's been a great beat to be a part of, because we do get along really well. We enjoy each other's company.
Yeah,
we enjoy giving each other, like, we give Solari a lot of grief.
Sure.
And yet he handles it well, right? And he takes it, and it's all in good fun. I enjoy Matt and Kyle as well. I enjoy their company a ton. I don't know. There's nobody who's like a big, when Rex Schroed was on the beat, we didn't miss a last call. That's the way it used to be.
Okay, gotcha.
Things have changed a little bit. Like I remember once at a football game at Nebraska where it was a later game, so we were going to be up against it. And he arranged with one of the SIDs there, and he had called a bar, and they held the door open for us. And there were like 4 or 5 writers racing down the streets of Lincoln with bags in hand to get into the bar just before closing, so they could shut the door. Our life. Joe, he covers Tennessee. He'll be in New York, so it could be. We may not make it to the game.
That's okay. The band is back together. Oh, that's awesome. I'm excited for you guys. The old reunion. That's great. But hey, Graham, this is awesome and great. Can't thank you enough for your time, your insight as always, especially, just during one of the busiest weeks of the entire season. So really appreciate you, man. You're the best. Anything you want to plug, but before we let you go, be a free man. Yeah.
I think people know where to find my stuff. I'll be in New York starting Tuesday night, and we'll have lots of good content throughout the week.
There we go. Just housing as much Sbarro pizza as possible. Absolutely love it. Well, hey, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate all of you. We're going to have someone from Kansas State side of things on later this week. We're also working on a few other guests right now. Just be patient with me, but it's going to be hard to climb over the bar that Graham has set right now. So thanks again, Graham, and thank you all. I love you all. Go Green. Let's go. God, this is so exciting.